Especially distracting, get rid of it. So if you have a book that's going to be temptation, anything that's going to be temptation, please get rid of it. All you need is your half sheet of paper, your name on it. There is going to be information that Colonel Waldron is going to be sharing with us that will be on the test. Okay? And he'll even reference that. But I do want to go and get started moving forward. So until a couple days, you've probably heard from other people. Our speaker today is retired Marine Corps Colonel Stephen Waldron. Many of you might know him as Cameron's dad. But he is going to be speaking from a lot of experience. Spent 27 years in the Marine Corps. Worked his way up to Colonel, which is right below General. So not just any normal guy in the military. A man that's really worked his way up to do a great job. And he's going to share a lot of wealth, a lot of knowledge about not only World War II, World War I and World War II, but also about the kind of the big picture of war. And that's a lot of what he's going to go into today. It's not specific battles, but more just try to build our understanding of why World War II took place and the background leading to World War II. And so I know you're going to be filled with knowledge, a lot of great stuff. This will be my 5th time to be a part of his presentation. I'm sure you're starting to wonder if you've said things before.
Hopefully I'm not missing anything.
Yes. But I'm still taking notes each time because it is fascinating for me. So make sure your attention is fully on him. Ask questions as we go. You will have opportunity to see all the really cool artifacts he's provided for us. So I'll let Colonel Stephen Waldron continue from here.
Thanks. You know, hopefully the one thing that I leave you with is to think and to think through some things and maybe see beyond what at first blush you think you see and kind of delve into some issues. So we'll kind of talk about that a little bit and then you'll kind of get where I'm coming from, hopefully. Yeah, I'm Cam's dad. Everybody knows Cam? All right. Who can tell me how his planner actually got into that light? He threw it up there?
No, he was just like having fun, you know. Playing catch, and then accidentally.
He told me some strange magnetic anomaly sucked it out of his hand, took it up into the light fixture, and I believed him. So, anyway, a little bit about myself. Yeah, I did 27 years in the Marine Corps. Retired in 2012. Graduated with a degree in poli-sci from Michigan State. Sorry to see my team go out of the tournament on Sunday. Went to law school at the University of Detroit, and then while I was in the Marine Corps, on active duty, got sent to a master's level class in strategic studies. And it's probably that school that I went to that is really kind of driving me in how I do this presentation today. So hopefully you get a little bit out of it and you enjoy it. Where are my World War II buffs? There has to be some more. Come on now. I got a half of one, Nick. Half. Who else? Nobody else. Okay. Well, hopefully we can get some comments going back and forth. You don't need to raise your hand. You can just kind of throw something out at me or answer questions. and we'll kind of go that way. So why is it that we study something that happened, 70-some years ago, and 80 years ago, 90 years ago? Why do we even look at that? Why do we care? Yeah.
So we can learn from our mistakes.
You bet. You bet. What else? Why is World War II important? Does it have any importance today?
It got us out of the Great Depression.
Well, it was one of the things. Yeah. Derek?
Well, it teaches us about world events and what happened and such stuff.
Yeah. Here's kind of my perspective on it. Take it or leave it. But you guys are going to vote in what? 4 or 5 years, right? You're 13, 14. And before you even think about casting a ballot, you ought to think about what that candidate's going to be capable of doing and what they're not going to be capable of doing. For you to cast an effective vote, I think you ought to know something about economics. I think you all should have read the Federalist Papers. And you all need to know something, in my mind, about World War II. The events that led up to it, how it was conducted, how it came about, and how it ended. All right? Because how it ended still impacts us today, all the time. You can't see really any large-scale geopolitical event that is somehow tied to how this war began, was conducted, or ended. So that's why it's critically important. So what I want to talk to you about first and you might want to take notes on this, is there are 3 levels of warfare, okay? The first one is the tactical level. The tactical level. That's the great lieutenants and captains that lead their troops into battle. Those are the ones that are engaging with the enemy, you know, in company size, platoon size, battalion size formations. They're the ones that are really in the fight every day. You've got the operational level, all right? This level is much larger scale. It's kind of a theater-wide level. So take a look at the map. You know, in World War I or even World War II, we had this whole European theater of operations, right? That's what we call the operational level of war, as divisions and armies move and how they interact with allies and with each other. That's the operational. The strategic level of war, that's where we're going to talk. All right? Those are the national leaders that make decisions that either keep us out of wars or get us into wars. As a career military man, you know, I've always had a real skepticism about who resides at this level, the politicians, right? What are politicians really good at? What are they really good at? Talking. Okay, politics. Getting elected. They're really good at getting elected. Or in other countries, really good at seizing power, right? But they may not be so good at understanding how all this geopolitical conflict kind of plays out. And so when I look for a leader, when I look to cast a vote, that's kind of where I'm thinking. Understand economics and how that plays out, understand Federalist Papers so we know sort of our own history and how the United States is supposed to work. And then understand this calamity that took place because of decisions that were made by leaders at this level that sent people like Mrs. Barron's uncle into the Battle of the Bulge, that sent me to Iraq, sent me to Afghanistan. Okay? So this is where we're going to kind of hover, the strategic level. What was Germany like at the end of World War I? Let's take us back. Yes, sir.
Devastated.
Yeah. Yeah, why were they devastated?
Because the giant war just took place and they lost.
Yep. What else? Nick?
Everything was destroyed.
Yeah, they were a wreck. All right. What actually officially ended World War I? The Treaty of... You guys, you don't need to raise your hand. If you got it, just going to throw it out. Treaty of Versailles, right. All right. What did that do to Germany? What were some of the things that the Treaty of Versailles imposed on the Germans?
Took out their military power.
Yeah. Destroyed the military power, no warplanes, no tanks, minimal shipping.
Germany had to pay reparations.
Bang. Reparations. Huge. What else? Yes, ma'am.
Kept them from being other land, like ever.
Well, they lost a lot of land, didn't they? So it took a lot away. Yeah, it's kind of neat when you look over here. Here's Germany in World War I, right? Okay, you got West Prussia, flow into East Prussia. Pretty big size. They still have this chunk of Alsace-Lorraine that they got in 1870 when they fought the French. And I'm no artist, you can tell from how I've drawn this. But this is Germany after World War I, after the Treaty of Versailles. They lost this chunk of Alsace-Lorraine, gone. They lost this huge chunk of property in here, huge chunk of their country, because Poland just kind of shifted over. And it created this wedge between East Prussia and the rest of Germany, right? So they lost all this land. And then you mentioned reparations, right? So here we have in 1919 a Germany that's lost, you know, a ton of land. Oh, I forgot to mention this chunk right here. It's called the Rhineland, right? Technically still inside of Germany, but this was their industrial heart. You know, when you think about the United States back in that time, you have, you know, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Detroit, the industrial engine of the United States. Back then, this was the same thing for Germany. And although they didn't actually lose it as a chunk of their property, the French were able to garrison it. So how do you think the Germans felt about the French garrisoning their economic heart and soul? Not too happy. Not too happy. Now on top of that, you're going to add the reparations. All right, so you have a bankrupt Germany from just a very expensive war, right? 4 years of warfare. You've got, you know, property loss, a huge chunk of your country gone. You've got reparations that you can't afford to pay, that you've got to pay. So you're exactly right. It was an absolute wreck. It was a wreck. So here you are. You're the head of. Oh, they deposed the Kaiser. He's out. So now you have this fledgling republic that's trying to take hold and take root, and it's doing so in the midst of this chaos. If you're the head of Germany, how are you going to pay these reparations? What are you going to do? How do you send money to France and to Britain and to Russia?
Yeah, you have other countries lend money.
Yeah, you can do that, which kind of kicks the can down the road a little bit because now you owe the other countries, right? But yeah, you can do that. What else? What's that?
That was mine.
Okay. You know what the Germans did? They just started to print money, right? They stoked up the printing presses and they just started to run marks right off the printing press. This is really kind of an interesting anecdote, but one of the most successful German industrialists after World War I, in the years that followed after World War I, was the guy that sold paper to the government to print the money. All right, so what do we know? If there's a ton of money in circulation, what happens to the value?
Decreases.
It goes just through the floor. So here the Germans are, they're printing money, they're absolutely broke. What happens to the confidence in the money, too? You know, it goes down. You know, what props up our dollar? Why is our dollar worth $1? Because people believe it's worth $1, right? Confidence plays a huge role. So you have no confidence, you have way too much in circulation, value drops. A loaf of bread in 1919 cost 1 mark. What do you think it cost in 1923? Think big. Throw out a number, any number.
20,000.
$1 billion. $1 billion. That's the scope and scale of this economic catastrophe that's hit Germany by 1923. If you have a job, as soon as you get paid, you run right out and you buy something with it because 20 minutes later it's worth less than it is right now. And so you had this mad spending and it was just economic chaos. And in chaos there's opportunity, and in opportunity you never know who's going to take advantage of it. And enter one kind of whacked out guy named Hitler. All right. So in 23, Hitler attempts this coup down in Munich called the Beer Hall Putsch. It doesn't go so well. Hitler gets thrown in jail, writes Mein Kampf, and in the interim, from 24 to 26, 27, 28, the Germans decide a couple of things. One, hey, the reparations is killing us, we're going to default, sorry. And two, they get control of their money supply a little bit, and things begin to stabilize. And actually there's the appearance that maybe this Weimar Republic in Germany might actually go somewhere. Then what happens in 1929? Think U.S., 1929, Wall Street, stock market crash, right? Okay, so the American stock market, and we weren't the major players in the world, a major player, but not the major player. But when our stock market crashed, that caused a ripple effect around the world. And just as Germany's starting to kind of climb out of this never-ending cycle of debt and all that, right off the cliff they go. So that's 1929, 1930. Now the Nazi Party is starting to gain a little bit of a foothold, right? Through intimidation, through communication, through every method at their disposal. They start to get into the Reichstag, which we'll call their essential equivalent to Congress, pockets of Nazis. And in each election cycle, it gets a little bit bigger. Kind of dirty players, the Nazis. You know, they had the group called the Brown Shirts that would show up at election halls and pummel guys, holding signs for the other candidate, kind of stuff like that. But gradually they got a little bit bigger foothold in the Reichstag. And that's sort of the situation. It's 1932 as presidential elections are coming into focus. So who thinks Hitler got into power illegally, vice legally? Who thinks it was illegally? All right, who thinks he got in legally? Most classes and most people think the other way, but you guys are exactly right. Adolf Hitler came to power completely legally and in accordance with the German Constitution, right? So we talk about strategic level decisions. All right, let's talk about this one. So how does he come into power? He runs for the presidency in 1932, and he gets beaten by a guy named Paul von Hindenburg. He was a field marshal from World War I. And think about Germany at this time as well, okay? Very aristocratic society, real hierarchical structure, you know, and field marshals with the name von, they run the show. What was Hitler? Where was he born? Austria, right? He's not even a German. What rank was he in World War I? He's a corporal. Nothing wrong with being a corporal, but a corporal typically in the United States Marine Corps is in charge of 3 other Marines, right? So we're not talking about a guy that, you know, had any experience with vast armies and leading hundreds of thousands of men. We're talking about an Austrian corporal versus a German field marshal in this election. Hitler does pretty well in the election. That shows you how upside down Germany had turned during those economic calamities, when the entire German aristocracy no longer held the sway that they did before. So it's really kind of fascinating. So Hitler loses. Hindenburg wins. Here's where he makes a strategic blunder, he being Hindenburg. Right? You've got these pockets of Nazis that are very, very vocal in the Reichstag. They start agitating for Hitler to be appointed as chancellor. So Hindenburg is the president. And under the Weimar Republic, the president was the head of state. Then you've got the chancellor, who essentially, think of him sort of as a prime minister type, or the speaker of the house type, right? He's in charge of the Reichstag and the legislative body, the head of government. That was an appointed position. And Hindenburg, and this was at with pressure from the industrialists, because Hitler talked a lot about rearming Germany, right? Pardon me. The industrialists thought, rearming Germany, we sell lots of tanks, we mine lots of coal, we build lots of airplanes, we make lots of what? Lots of money. So the industrialists backed Hitler. Hindenburg, probably against his better judgment, makes the strategic blunder of a lifetime and appoints Hitler as chancellor. All right? Hitler is a von, I'm sorry, Hindenburg is a von, so German aristocracy, he thinks he can control Hitler. The industrialists, lots of money, they think they can control him too, but nobody can control this guy. So he's in power as the chancellor for only a few months in 1933, when the Reichstag catches fire. Right? So picture our Capitol building going up in flames. To this day, nobody knows for sure who set it. Some people think that it was a communist, a Dutch communist, that set the fire in the Reichstag. Some people think that Hitler's guys, the Nazis, set the fire themselves. Either way, Hitler immediately takes advantage of it, and he pushes, cajoles, influences the Reichstag to vote to him absolute legislative power for a period of 4 years in response to this crisis. All right? So, strategic blunder number 2. Reichstag says, yeah, you know, building burned down, done by the communists are causing problems. Okay, we'll vote you these powers. Now Hitler has control of Germany because he alone can make the laws. All right? So again, strategic blunder, internal to Germany, probably number 2. Hindenburg dies in 1934. Hitler decides we're going to merge the 2 offices, president with chancellor, and bang, you know, game over. He's running the whole show. So, what does he do with these powers? He outlaws the Communist Party, the Social Democrats, the conservatives, all the other parties done. Germany is now one party, one voice, one system. Ein Volk, ein Reich, ein Führer. One people, one government, one leader. And he's got everything. So now let's go back to Versailles, to the humiliation that was brought on. Did I ask about what comes with humiliation? What comes with humiliation? either if you're personally humiliated or as a nation if you're humiliated. What do you want? Yeah, you want revenge. You want revenge. It's funny, every class seems to answer the same way. They know that. And that's what that nation wants. So here we are. It's 1936. So he's been in office 3 years. He's kind of eyeballing the Rhineland, right? And he tells his generals, you're going to march into the Rhineland, you're going to remilitarize it. And the French are going out. And the generals say, you know, hey, Adolf, we don't have the power right now. And they didn't. They were still a rebuilding military. And in 1936, France is the largest army in the world. And the German generals are scared because they don't want to get into it with the French because they know they're not going to win. All right? But Hitler's not one of those guys who can be controlled. Industrials couldn't, Hindenburg couldn't. Nobody can control him. He says, yeah, you're going to go. So what do you think happens? They gear up what they have of the German Wehrmacht, and they roll back into the Rhineland. They reoccupy it, they remilitarize it. What do the French and the British do? Do they go to war? What do they do? Just throw it out at me.
Can we give it to them? Just out of sympathy?
French kind of say, geez, see you later. All right? The French do nothing. The Brits do nothing. So now, how is Hitler viewed by his people? Yeah, holy cow, this guy came in and he took this back. You know, now we have a degree of you know, a little German pride going here again. All right? But is that all Hitler wanted? No. Now, one thing I didn't tell you, and I forgot to, was, maybe I didn't. Blomberg, the German general, when he sent the troops in, he had a standing order. If there's so much as an ounce of resistance from the French, a shot fired, we're done, operation over, we're pulling back to Germany. So right there, if the French had said no, if the French had stood up, if the Brits had, there's no Rhineland reoccupied. But they did nothing. Right up here, strategic level. Hey, they were still tired from World War I. They didn't want to get in a fight. So they said, well, that's kind of their land, just let it go. Hitler says, of course, that's all he's ever going to want. But about 1938, he rethought that. All right, Austria, you know, that's the homeland. That's where he's from. Now, he'd renounced his citizenship from Austria since then and become a German citizen and all that. But he began to build pockets of Nazi agitators throughout Austria. And the Austrians also saw the success here, and a lot of them willingly joined. And they attempted a coup, and in fact killed the president at one point. But the coup failed. Austria still remained sovereign, its own country, until the Italians started to waver a little bit, because they were the ones who were kind of keeping an eye on the Austrians, until the French did what the French do, right? And the Italians, who's now heading Italy? Benito Mussolini. Is he a good guy or a bad guy? Yeah, not such a good guy. See, that's the thing with these totalitarian leaders, right? When you're in charge of everything, you can say what you want, when you want, and nobody really questions you because you've already done away with your opposition parties and you've already taken control of the press. So a series of lies means nothing because there's no one there to call you on it. Anyway, so the Italians kind of back off with their support of the Austrians, you know, the government in charge, and they begin to weaken. And in 1938, Hitler tells 2 presidents removed from the guy that got assassinated, we're going to be coming down there and we're going to annex Austria. You guys ever see Sound of Music? You can admit it. All right? You know the scene where the Germans come in? All right? That's the Anschluss. That's what we're talking about here. The Germans came in and many of the Austrians welcomed them, and you know, many did not. But strategic failure on the part of the Austrians, strategic failure on the part of the Italians, and the French to do nothing. And the Anschluss is complete. Austria is absorbed into what they're now calling Greater Germany, Großdeutschland. And Hitler says, that's all I'll ever want. It's all good, guys. It's all I ever want. Was it? No, no, there's always one thing more. So there's this area right here between Czechoslovakia and Germany. It's called the Sudetenland. Hitler looks at that and says, you know, I kind of fancy that area. And there were 2.8 million ethnic Germans there. Ethnic Germans, but by all accounts, quite happy in Czechoslovakia, not oppressed, not taken advantage of, just good citizens. But there's a lot of resources in that area, a lot of Germans, and Hitler decides, that's what I want next. So what he does is, he begins to manufacture some incidents, and he claims that, you know, these Germans, these ethnic Germans in the Sudetenland are in danger, and they need security. All right? Sound a little bit like the Reichstag, sort of manufacture a crisis, and then use it to your advantage. All right? So he makes this claim that, you know, we have this ethnic group here that needs our support, they're being taken advantage of, and so we're going to move our troops into the Sudetenland. All right, the Czechs say, no, no, you're not. The Brits initially say, no, no, you're not. So we're into this big sort of, are we going to fight or are we not going to fight cycle? But does that remind you guys of anything that you're seeing today where maybe a large power is claiming that, you know, we needed to move into this particular country because we have some ethnic identification there and we think that they're in trouble?
Russia?
Yeah, where's Russia go? Crimea, that's right. It's a part of the Ukraine. Crimea is part of the Ukraine. Sudetenland was part of Czechoslovakia. All right, so do you think maybe Putin has read his Hitler? Do you think he's read his history? Because it's as though he opened up the history book and read from Hitler's speech in terms of why he needed to go into Crimea. Because we have ethnic Russians in Crimea, and we're concerned about their security, and we need to make sure that they remain safe. It's like he read the book, all right? Well, guess what? Obama's read the book too, and so have Kerry. And so why is it that we're all fired up about whether or not they go any further?
Because it could just end up like Germany, they just keep taking a little more.
That's exactly right. So when I talked to you before about this being so critical to knowing your candidates and knowing perhaps their skill level in this realm, it's because of this, and you're seeing an absolute repeat of that history today, because you've got Russian troops on the border of eastern Ukraine. They've already taken all of Crimea. So are they going to go into to the eastern part of Ukraine and take that too? Just like we'll see that Germany did? Or through aggressive leadership are we going to be able to check them? This will be really interesting to watch. Hillary Clinton showed up a couple weeks ago on one of those morning talk shows that you know, nobody ever watches, and talked about the same sort of thing. So when you hear comments about appeasement, comments about Munich, comments about, you know, how you deal with dictators, it's because of this. And if you don't understand that, you're going to be kind of lost. Really? Dang it. All right, I was rolling.
About
Okay.
a little more.
All right. So, and a little bit on the Crimea. This is interesting. I'll throw this anecdote at you. You know how the Russians got into the Crimea? Not the troops now, but the ethnic Russians are all worried about? Okay. In World War II, the Germans took Crimea, right? When the Russians pushed them back out, what they did was they took all of the ethnic folks, not all, but huge swaths of the ethnic people, the Tatars, living in Crimea, put them on boxcars and sent them to Siberia and trucked in ethnic Russians. Everywhere you look in the old Soviet republics, Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, Crimea, Ukraine, that's what they did. They boxed out the people, they boxcarred out the people that were living there and brought in ethnic Russians. Why? So that one day they could still make this claim. So here we are, it's September of 1938, and there's this great conference at Munich to discuss what's going to happen with the Sudetenland. And you got Britain, France, Germany, and who's actually facilitating this? None other than Mussolini. How do you like that guy as the great impartial facilitator? All right? So you know how this thing is going to go. War is threatened, war is talked about, all of that, but ultimately the British, the French concede, and they will not fight over the Sudetenland. Who wasn't there? Czechoslovakia. You know, how'd you like it if the Canadians, the Mexicans, and the Virgin Islanders got together and decided what was going to happen to Florida? You know, that's kind of what happened here. They weren't even in the conversation, and so they were left out. Sudetenland goes over to Germany, and again, when you hear reference to Munich, reference to appeasement, that's what is being talked about. All right, so in that chaos, as 38 turns 1939, Hungary decides they want part of Czechoslovakia. Poland decides, you know, they have some territorial claims, and they take part of it. Hitler then, through hook and by crook, gets Slovakia to break away from the Czech part, and in January, February, March, they make their push for the entire thing, and they take it all. So here we have this whole sequence of events, from occupying the Rhineland, to Austria, to the Sudetenland, to the rest of Czechoslovakia, that if France and Britain at this level had checked that, do we blunder our way into a war? Who knows? I mean, that's a great question for history. But that's how it happened. Through appeasement, through taking no action, through allowing all that to happen, that's where we are. And that's why today, you hear about this all the time, in Russia, throughout the Cold War period. Now, Hitler talked that these were absolutely his last territorial claims. Were they? Yeah. Because next was, you know, I lost all this chunk of land in World War I. Gee, we need to reunite East Prussia with the rest of Germany. I need the Polish corridor. And Britain and France finally said, you know, no, you're not going to get it. Germany rolls into Poland, absolutely destroys them in about 4 weeks, and France and Britain declare war, and then game on. So you have this series, again, of political missteps by Chamberlain of Great Britain, Daladier of France, at the high level, which absolutely sets the stage, coupled with the Treaty of Versailles, which was a mistake here, and Hindenburg's actions, which were a mistake here, sets the stage for this calamitous war that is suddenly upon the world. So I'll kind of close with just a couple of side thoughts to give you a little bit of context. How am I doing? What time do we wrap up?
We're at 23. So
At 23?
23. So it's like a little over 10 minutes.
All right, I got a little bit of time.
Yeah, we got some time to work with.
All right. Next week, you're going to talk about Pearl Harbor. It's actually pretty fascinating how all that came about. But as you're kind of going through that, you know, one thing I want you to leave with today is the ability to sort of think things through and think in deeper and broader terms. All right? So I'm going to kind of, as you're going through Pearl Harbor, make you think about this a little bit. All right, so who attacked Pearl Harbor? Was it the Germans or the Japanese? All right, that's right. But prior to that, Roosevelt and Churchill had kind of made an agreement that if and when the United States ever had to enter this war, right, that there would be a Germany first policy because they were the greater evil of the two, and we'd defeat Germany and then take out Japan. So now you're Franklin Roosevelt, and you suddenly find yourself plunged into this war. Who wants to be Roosevelt for this question? Come on, give me a Roosevelt. All right, Nick Roosevelt. You're the president. You have this Germany first agreement with Churchill, but the Japanese are the ones that attacked you, and the American people, you know, now want vengeance against Japan, and they're the focus. How is it that we go from the Japanese attacking us to being at war with Germany so we can execute the Germany first policy? How do you do it, Mr. President? That's tough. The reason Nick's having a hard time is because it's daggone tough. And Roosevelt sat there saying the same thing. Man, if only the Germans could have attacked Pearl Harbor.
Do it quickly. Like, try to find something like nuclear weapons.
Well, we don't have nukes then.
Oh, we don't?
But what's the legal justification to now jump into a war with Germany when it was Japan that attacked us?
That Japan and Germany are working together?
Yeah, a little bit of a stretch, but that's the best legal reason that there was out there. What does Hitler do? All right, as Roosevelt is struggling over this, in the days after Pearl Harbor, how am I going to make this work? I can get a declaration of war against the Japanese, that's easy, but how do I get a declaration of war out of the Congress, who represent the American people, for Germany? Hitler makes yet another fateful strategic decision. He'd been successful here, and here, not so successful here. He declares war on the United States. I think Roosevelt probably could have kissed him, right? Because now his problems are done. He's at war with Germany. We're at war with Japan. Not that he wanted to be at war with Japan, but now he can fulfill his national strategic vision, and the Germans serve that up to him very, very easily. Yes, sir?
Why Germany declare war on the United States?
See, that's one of those great things of history, because they did have a treaty with the Japanese, but they were not absolutely treaty-bound to declare war on the U.S. because Japan attacked us. So that's one of those things where you just go, man, I don't know what you were thinking, but okay. And so that's what happened. Strategic blunder in my mind. So I'll kind of wrap it up with this. We haven't talked a lot about battles or theaters or things like that. We've talked about how political leaders at the strategic level blunder us into wars. And that's what I want you to kind of think about today, tomorrow, into the future. But just to give you some perspective on the scale of this, this titanic conflict that broke out, I'll talk just for a second about the German invasion of the Soviet Union. On June 22nd, 1941, so it's before we entered the war, right? Hitler, who actually had a non-aggression pact with Stalin, which is also head-scratching because fascists and communists are at the complete opposite end of the spectrum. They entered into this non-aggression pact where they wouldn't attack each other so that they could split Poland. Right? Germany attacks Poland, they split it with the Russians, they all shake hands, at the whatever river that was, and they each take their share. And Stalin, strategic blunder, never thinks Hitler's going to lie, despite him lying here, and here. Never sees it coming. So the Germans attack on June 22nd, 1941, with somewhere between 4 and 6 million troops in the first attack wave. So I want to put that in perspective for you. If you took every man, woman, and child in Kansas City, the city itself, 450,000. All right, you take every man, woman, and child in Overland Park, it's another 250,000. If you throw in every man, woman, and child in St. Louis, that takes you up to about 1 million. That's about 350,000. All right, so picture all the people from all those cities online, ready to attack, and then multiply it by 4 or 6. All right, that is a titanic battle. Just of proportions it's hard to even fathom today. And the Russians lost about 25 million people in their war against Germany. So, we have our strategic issues. We're real sensitive to this day about that Pearl Harbor attack. We're real sensitive about that sneak attack at 9/11. That's kind of our area of emphasis as we go about our strategic decision making. The Russians, not to be an apologist for them because I'm no fan of the Russians, but their national fear is some sort of attack along those lines. That's why they're very protective of Ukraine and Belarus and those countries that are on that that border in there, and they don't like to see they don't like to see troops coming there. They don't like to see those folks aligning with NATO. But anyway, so you take the German-Russian theater, you add in the Western European theater, you add in the Pacific, you add in China, Burma, India, North Africa. This is a world war on just a titanic scale with hundreds of millions of people killed when all is said and done, largely as a result of blunders made at the strategic level that allowed this thing to kick off. So that's pretty much it. I did bring in some cool stuff, and we have, you said 23?
23.
So we have about 8 minutes. I have a couple of pistols. This is the M1911 Colt 45. This is what all American service members, staff non-commissioned officers and officers carried. This particular one was built in 1918. I don't know if it went to World War I, but I do know that it was in World War II. If you want to pick it up, you're fine to. You'll see that I have a zip tie in it. You cannot fire, it's not loaded, but we're going to treat them all like they are. So if you want to pick it up, keep your finger outside the trigger well and then point it only at this wall, please. All right? This is, if you've ever seen a war movie, the German officers are always carrying this. This is a German Luger. It was made in 1940, and by the account that I got before I bought it, it was on the Western Front, and it was taken off of the German officer. What's very interesting with this is when you pick it up, if you hold your hand out, straight out, you'll see how ergonomically well designed it is, that when you pick this up, it's right on target. So the Germans were very fastidious in their engineering and did a really nice job. You can touch anything except, please don't touch this. This is a World War I German Pickelhaube. It's a German officer's helmet. They phased this out in 1915, 1916, because you can imagine walking in the trenches with this spike sticking up, makes for a really nice sniper's target. A friend of mine gave me the German Iron Cross, and his grandfather took this off of the German the hard way. We'll leave it at that. But here's some holsters. Again, please don't pick up the Iron Cross or the helmet, but anything else you're good to go with. This is an American 3-inch naval gunfire round. Picture a bullet right here, fired off. And we have some helmets. First one's American, the middle one is Japanese, and the last one is German.
This is the American, Japanese,
German. And a hand grenade and a 50 cal round. So knock yourselves out. I enjoyed talking to you. Thanks very much.